Well, it's time to have a look through the papers once again today with the comedian Kate Smurthwaite and the editor of Politics Home, Kevin Schofield. Good morning.
Morning.
Kevin, to the Mail on Sunday, stop and search.
Yeah, so there's been a wave of violence in London over the past 2 or 3 weeks, and the government inevitably has had to come up with a plan to try and deal with it. And Amber Rudd, the Home Secretary, is unveiling a new package of measures, essentially, to try and crack down on the problem. And included in it is beefed up powers on stop and search.
I mean, it seems sensible.
Yeah. Well, the way the Mail have done it, it's quite a clever way, is they're saying this is a U-turn by Theresa May, which is true, because when she was Home Secretary, if you remember, she made a big play of the fact that stop and search was disproportionately aimed at young black men who were being stopped and searched regularly. So she reduced the number of stop and search. Now, at the time, David Cameron, I think, was a bit nervous about this because he thought it played badly in terms of the Tories' reputation for law and order. And now, lo and behold, because of this wave of violence, the Home Secretary is now having to sort of bring it back, something that her predecessor, who's now the Prime Minister,
I have to say, I really feel like this is a bit of the sort of like being seen to do something. And the truth is that we've done the research and, you know, evidence-based stop and search. If you've got a good reason to think someone's carrying something, of course you should be stopping and searching. But this kind of random stop and search, they've looked at the evidence on it, and it turns out that what happens, of course, is that you find people who've got a tiny amount of drugs in, you know, for personal use or whatever, and those people then get criminalised because it's an easy tick for the police. Oh, look, we've found a crime and we've solved it, you know. Numbers, crime-solving numbers go up. And what that does, of course, is it criminalises young people. And when they are disproportionately targeting people from certain backgrounds, that's a huge problem. And then once you've criminalised people, then it's difficult for them to get jobs. And then the likelihood that they're going to end up involved in gangs goes up.
But isn't the idea with this that because they're going to be specifically looking for weapons, aren't they? So maybe there will be more discretion on those. Well,
if they can put it into the thing that's, first of all, if they can put it in that says we're not, you know, if we find that there's a little bit of marijuana, we're not going to, you know, you're not going to get in trouble for that. Don't worry about that. We're looking for really, really serious stuff. OK, that would be a step in the right direction. But it's also the case that because they're targeting people from certain groups and from certain communities, you know, I know young black guys who've been stopped, you know, 2-3 times a week, and then they're late for work, and then they're late for work again 2 days later, and it's hugely disruptive, you know. And speaking as a, you know, middle-class white woman, I've never ever been stopped. Of course I haven't. And so it seems like, are we creating actually a situation in which we're making life really difficult?
But what do you do?
People?
You can't ignore this knife.
Oh, I'm not suggesting we can't.
Yeah, I think there has to be a balance.
There has to be a balance.
But what police are saying now is that as long as it's evidence-based, that there is a reason to stop and search someone, and that it's carried out within certain parameters. You know, that you are courteous to the person that you are stopping and searching, and you explain to them the reason why you're doing it, and it's evidence-based. Then that's slightly different to stopping.
I think if it's evidence-based, then there's that. Then fair enough. Of course, if you have a reason based on evidence to believe that somebody's carrying something, then of course, you know, it makes complete sense to stop people. But it has to come from actual evidence, not from kind of, you know, you look a bit like somebody who we thought might have been a problem last week. It has to come from actual evidence, and as such, when you stop somebody, they should be entitled to go, "What's your evidence?" And they'll go, "Oh well, you know, here's your evidence," and then you know, and also in terms of the way that police time is used, you know, there are lots of things that police could be doing. There are lots and lots of unsolved crimes out there, and you know, there must be leads coming in about these kind of things. And are we investigating those fully? Are we going into communities and actually, you know, tackling these problems? There are other ways of dealing with this. The idea of stopping people in the street, it's not the only approach we can take.
Will there be cross-party support for this, Kevin, under the circumstances?
Well, Labour's position on it has always been that it's come from austerity, essentially. The problem is that the police have had to bear quite a lot of the brunt of public spending cuts, so the number of police officers has reduced by around about 20,000, I think it is. And if you remember the general election last year, that played very, very well for Labour, particularly around about the time of the terror attacks during the election campaign. Labour were able to turn around and say, well, look, the number of bobbies on the beat has drastically reduced, therefore we're at greater risk, and the public certainly flock to that message. I think Labour's position would be, OK, this is all well and good, but until you actually put serious money, reverse the cuts, in terms of policing and increasing number of police
otherwise you're
officers on
saying,
the
hey,
street.
police, go and do X, and that means there's less police to go
And also,
and
there's
look
no
at
point
something else.
giving them extra powers if there aren't enough police on
Yeah.
the street to actually do
But
it.
it does point towards that being a solution, with 300 more policemen being on the street, police officers being on the street this weekend.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
it's so
but it
tiny
has to
relative
be.
to
But it shows
it
that
has
it's
to be
dropped
sustained.
already.
It can't
More
just
boots on
be
the
a
ground.
one-off blitz.
Okay, any thoughts on that? Let us know. To the Observer, Kate, looking at money and the richest 1%.
Yeah, so the Observer reports on this fascinating and frankly pretty shocking report that shows that at current trends, the way things are looking at the moment, by 2030, the richest 1% of the world's population will own 2/3 of all the wealth. And it's not about income inequality, because this is not people who are, this is just accumulation. 1/3 of the world's money presently sits in offshore tax havens and doesn't pay any tax. And of course, that's the richest, 1% of the world's population. And that money is just accumulating and accumulating. And the rest of us are working hard, paying taxes. And every time a little sliver of that is sliding into the pockets of the richest 1% who are paying no tax on it. And it's interesting. It raises questions really for me, about the whole nature of money and whether it's working for us. The idea should be you work and you're paid and you can exchange what you're paid for the goods and services of other people's work. The idea that 2/3 of the world's money is going to be sat in the pockets of 1% of people, and certainly not the 1% that do most of the work.
I think that's why people are searching for different answers. They're looking at the political consensus probably the last 30 years and thinking, well, it's not working. There's gross inequality, so they're looking at sort of left-wing ideas, also looking at right-wing ideas. It feeds into the whole Donald Trump being elected, Britain voting for Brexit, the popularity of Jeremy Corbyn, all this type of stuff. And this, I think, just exemplifies why people are no longer willing to put up with essentially as I say, the political and economic consensus.
Right across the political spectrum, I think you'd struggle to find anybody who would say, well, we should keep the tax havens. I think globally, who on earth out there is going, well, I think it's reasonable that the super rich can put their money in the Canary Islands.
But every government,
apart from the super rich.
Yeah, exactly. That this 1%, and they obviously, 1% can't outvote 99%. But when are we going to have politicians who are bold enough to step up and say, let's do this? Obviously, I say that it's absolutely on Corbyn's agenda, but it's difficult because it has to be every country around the world.
Well, that's the problem. Yeah, it's not up to us to say what any other country can do in terms of their tax
but I don't think that the public in France is any less... the public in France were like, oh, great, we love tax havens. I don't think anybody around the world feels that way.
Yeah. OK, again, any thoughts on that? Let us know. We're going to take a short break. Back with more in a moment.